Thank you, all of you. That was lovely. I'm sure you all have questions, tons of them, but I'm dying to ask this one. So I'm going to start. This whole AI charade, the whole magic, as you call it, is it just live-action role play for some kind of social learning we're
Who are you asking?
doing? I'm looking at you because you said live-action role play, but I'm asking all three.
That's right.
No, I know you should go first.
Is it just live action role play? I think if so, but then it's for machines.
Yeah.
We pretend and live and dream with machines, and sometimes those are beautiful dreams, and sometimes they can be dark magic.
I actually think that in the same way, I was very big on social media when I was a little teen, and everybody was very judgmental about it. They were like, what are you doing with those people on the internet? And actually, some of my best relationships were built there, and I learned a lot from those people. I think the next generation will learn a lot with the help of AI. Already, similarly, we're seeing young people struggling with mental health talk to AI chatbots because they don't feel safe talking to their loved ones, and because they don't want to worry their loved ones. And I actually think that these tools, whether we like it or not, are going to integrate into our lives, and the next generation are going to be using them. So we should be thinking about how we can enable healthy learning habits around them.
I mean, I have a bit of a, I genuinely think we've come to the point where any distinction between physical and digital spaces is just pointless now, right? You know, there's all these words like phygital. What was the one?
Digiphysical.
Digiphysical.
Digifizzy.
Digifizzy. You know,
I
that's
like that
like
one, though. It's
peak
quite silly.
collapse of a concept, no?
Digifizzy.
Digifizzy.
Do you want a digifizzy?
Digifizzy?
Yeah.
You want to-
It sparkles. It sparkles.
So, like, I don't know, we're in this trap right now where, you know, I think still, and it's understandable among all of us, no, is that when we think about something like AI, we sort of externalize it and we think of it as this thing, but it's going to become very embodied very quickly. And I think it would help us all if we just started to acknowledge this new reality now.
Good point.
Right
I'm going to
now.
open up for questions. There should be a mic coming to you from there.
Little light jog.
Yeah, I know. Just all right.
It's actually just a really short public service question. This exhibition that you're working on, James, where is it taking place?
Yeah, I
Good
realized.
question.
So, like, you actually are like the first to hear about this. It's not even announced yet. It will be announced in January, but it will happen at Arkdes in Stockholm in September 2025, and then it will open in the Netherlands in September 2026. And that's pretty much all I can officially say right now. But I know if you just keep an eye out on these museums' websites, you'll find information about it. Thank you for asking.
Next question. There, okay. I come to you and you. Here, right there.
Yeah, you talked about LARPing, and of course we're LARPing here, and when we go to work we're LARPing, but isn't that like ordinary society LARPing, but we have taken away all the fun and play?
I mean, a question that like I'm grappling with, right? Yeah. And I think the question is that we need to, like, even that I think is, you know, this everything or nothing question. We need to sort of start to understand there's a whole series of nuance under that. The way to start right now, I think, is that because live action roleplay and LARP designers have this kind of like very strong community right now, and there's a very clear sort of direction they're going in, I think we're at the point where we have to draw a dotted line around what is like an emerging creative practice. Of course, like ultimately, like any subculture going mainstream, this will soon become also quite integrated into our lives. But I think that the intention is what makes it an act of creativity. It's what makes it an act of design. And I think that's what we need to maybe look at in order to then understand how we can build that up even more and integrate it more into our lives. So yes and no.
There was someone in the middle there. Yeah, there.
Hey, thank you so much for the talk. I was curious about the whole analogy of magicians and witches.
Yep.
Because where we work in Anya, we have all of our leaders scrambling to kind of create the court magicians. And I'm curious, like, how could we argue to rather support the witches, or should we?
So it's a really good question. I think one of the things that you can help work with is to argue for things to be open source, for them to be related, both whatever models you use, argue for using open source models, argue for looking how you might reinvest and bring knowledge back into the communities that you're working with, whether that's through licensing deals as opposed to scraping, and argue, I think, for interfaces that allow the users to find out more. So that they can be active participants in finding out of knowledge and moving. And yeah, I hope that helps. I don't have answers, but I have a couple of ideas. And I'm very interested to hear on what your thoughts about that practice are.
Thanks.
You're very
Laura,
welcome.
do you have anything to say on this?
On
Witches and code.
just witches and cults in general.
Yeah.
Yes.
In life and in work.
I mean, what I found very interesting about your presentation, specifically the witches taking their power from community, was, again, it kind of reminded me of what I was also thinking about, which is that, in a way, part of the reason that people look to online communities to plug these social knowledge gaps is because there are less offline public spaces, there's more social anxiety, etc., but also because crowdsourcing from a wider pool of humans who maybe share your values or share your experiences is an incredibly valuable witchcraft that actually the witches of yore, I feel like, would be quite envious of.
Yeah.
And so there's no black and white, right? It's all kind of grey areas and nuanced senses of good and bad mixed together.
Yeah, I think so. And just on a very practical level as well, there's some really interesting research out now which shows that once LLMs are fully separated from the underpinning information and commons that they stem from, they become less and less accurate. So there's also sort of technical reasons which time really beautifully with this sort of communitarian spirit for why to keep quite close to your sources of information and knowledge, which I also think makes a beautiful metaphor.
Well, also there's some quite creepy implications of the LLM kind of pulling on everyone's data. Like, there was one theorist who's based in Shanghai who talks about sex with AI chatbots.
Yeah.
And she was saying, like, when I sext with an AI, am I sexting with everyone?
Yeah.
Like with the hive mind, which is quite a creepy and fascinating philosophical idea to unpack.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things why we feel this whole difference between, the witches and the people at top is because AI is one of the technologies that is actually completely privately controlled. A lot of our technologies, for example, internet, came through public means. It was available publicly. And AI, on the other hand, in its current form, comes from places which are very tightly controlled, and hence we find it so difficult to engage with it because we have to knock on a door and then enter with those rules set by those people. We want to play. There was a question back. Yeah. Okay. There and then you.
I just have it's maybe a bad question because you can't answer it. It's to Laura about Reddit. How do you maybe personally feel about the rumors that Reddit is closing up subreddits behind a paywall, giving the information to AI? So you're talking about all the sensitive information that we are giving out, looking for community. But on the other hand, now kind of the play fades because the money comes in and the subreddits are behind paywalls, or maybe in a few months.
It is a good question, but it's also a bad one because all of those things are outside of my jurisdiction in my role at Reddit. I'm sorry.
Sorry again.
How do you feel personally about it as a community manager and representing the community in the company, maybe?
I don't think I can comment on it.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
That gentleman there had a question.
Well, my question was a little bit close to what has just been asked. So, but I am a bit I do not think AI all of the good things that I think that we got tricked once. The internet was for everybody, and no, it's not. And AI also has a way of scrapping all the data, and both presenters talked about the commons and the witches and how how magic is ours, and then it was partitioned and to my appreciation, Reddit is. She talks about public spaces. It's not a public place. It's a space where public comes, where of course there interaction, etc. But I'm not sure it's a public place. So that's what. How can we solve that next step? AI has uses, but how can we really appropriate it? The people can appropriate instead of being it because big companies are just scraping data that belongs to the commons, and they're using it, and then they're going to resell it to ourselves. So I would like to know how people can take charge of their data and their work, and not be tricked once again, because the internet is just for our use, but not for our possession.
I guess we're talking about tactics that we can use
Yeah.
to get to that stage that we want to get to in this situation where we are. Each of us individually doesn't control anything there. But maybe you have ideas about tactics from someplace.
I mean, I think from my perspective also, like, very much what I'm saying is there are very few public spaces. Like these, what my presentation was about was what all spaces can learn from what makes Reddit communities really enjoyable for so many people, right? And I think we see again with public spaces. I was reading recently about how many public parks have literally been, bought by corporations, and then now they're technically owned by a corporation rather than the public. Something actually that in Malmo there was a lovely human-owned park that we went to the other day. But I digress. But I think, but I think there are strategies that we can take to create those spaces as individuals. And it's very much, we see it happening in so many of the community groups that we see in our everyday lives, right? Whether that be like a book club or whatever. There are ways that we can create spaces that do this using the same tactics that I talked about today. But I think the notion that any kind of online space will ever necessarily be fully public domain is tricky.
Yeah, and I'm kind of happy to jump in there as well. I think it is worth of us thinking, to Laura's point about like what is a public space and who owns it and how can you act it in many places in the world. Inside a McDonald's is one of the few sort of safe public spaces that you can have if you feel vulnerable late at night, right? And that's like in many ways the sort of stereotypically culturally imperious big bad American company. So I think that you can still have community within non-public places, right? Or privately owned ones. I also think that what we are seeing is, yes, there's the kind of original sin of the internet being walled gardened and privatized and all those sorts of things. But I think one of the things as practitioners we need to think strongly about is how do we fund and support open source alternatives? Do we find them? How do we fund the compute power? Do we think that the regulatory track is the most powerful one, sort of allying ourselves with traditional, perhaps not particularly tech literate forms of authority? Or, do we contribute to open source projects? Do we mark our content, for example, as for Creative Commons use, under which circumstances? And when we, do we make choices ourselves based on what model something is trained on? Those are a couple of tactics and ideas. I'm also always very open to hearing other people's thoughts about that. But I think that there is hope, and I think there can be movement. And I think that there is also value and potential in the work of court magicians. Not all court magicians.
Thank you.
So.
Did you have anything to add to that?
No,
James?
I'm overheating.
Yeah.
I don't know about you.
But you look very glamorous while doing so, which
Thank
I
you
would
so
not.
much. Can we have a big round of applause for these guys?
Thank you.